Okay, we're on the hour, so because we're time constrained, we're going to get started. Welcome to IoT Week at CES. I'm Keith Kreischer, the Executive Director of the IoT M2M Council. And this is how low-power IoT can help save the planet, a part of the CTA's Umbrella Conference program. Just a quick word about the IMC. With 25,000 product makers, designers, OEMs, enterprise users, and apps developers as members, the IMC is the largest professional organization dedicated to the global IoT sector. Our mission is to accelerate the adoption of IoT technology for the public good, and we look at this session on IoT and sustainability as exactly in keeping with that mission. With that, I'll introduce our moderator, who is Benson Chan, co-founder and CTO of the Strategy of Things Group. Just a word about Benson. He's not just ex-Cisco, but he also happens to be the chairman of the IoT Advisory Board for the National Institute for Standards and Technology. That is ostensibly the group that will direct all those billions in infrastructure dollars as it pertains to IoT. So with that, Benson, take us away.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Good afternoon, everyone. And Keith, thank you for the great introduction. So I'll read off the topic, and then we'll talk a little bit about that this afternoon. So climate disasters, breaking infrastructure, stressed supply chains, and low food productivity are certainly issues that in the public foreground. But there's hope. I think IoT technology, sensors, AI, provide a lot of potential opportunities to help save the planet. Right? So there's a whole slew of technologies that's coming out, that's emerging, that's in the marketplace. Some have been around for a little while, but many you may not have heard of. So we'll talk a little bit about how some of these technologies can help play our part in helping save the planet. So what we'll do today, we'll start off with, we'll introduce myself, I'll introduce the panelists will introduce themselves. We'll go into some questions. We encourage, at the end, we'll encourage questions from the audience, and then we'll be around after the session if you have any questions that you want to follow up on. So I'll start off with introducing myself. My name is Benson Chan. I'm one of the co-founders of Strategy of Things. We're an innovation company. We're based out in Silicon Valley. When we're not doing this, my day job is smart cities. We work, for example, with the County of San Mateo. We built out their innovation lab. We ran their lab. We run a lot of little innovation projects. We're scaling some of those projects. One we're doing now is the Smart Corridor project, where we're the systems engineers and we're implementing that. Our company is an innovation company. We look at some of these emerging technologies, and we help cities, communities, and the businesses within them become much more responsive and resilient. We offer advisory services, consulting, innovation labs, and helping companies scale some of those projects as they go to the next stage. Let's see, with that, I'm going to let Mobeen introduce himself and his company.
Thank you, Benson. Thanks for inviting me here, and Keith for allowing me to speak here today. I think from a conference, that program title perspective, I feel like it's a bit of a hyperbole and save the planet with IoT, but I think we can do a lot in terms of helping to set the strategies that can eventually help save the planet. So that's how I look at it. I run a small company called Blues Wireless. We're a startup, and our goal and mission is to reduce the friction and the complexity of building connected products, primarily cellular connected products. And we are exhibiting here. There's a whole IoT infrastructure area there with all of our companies are there and many, many others. So if you're interested in this topic, I would urge you to go to that part of in North Hall, go to the IoT infrastructure area and learn a lot about it. I've been in the mobility industry for a couple of decades and in IoT for at least 10 years. I love doing this stuff and love doing connected products. And specifically, I would say Blues Wireless, which is the company I'm with right now, has an IoT for Good program. And as we go into the topics, I'll talk a little bit about that as well.
Great. My name is Natasha Barrios. I'm the Vice President of Sales in North America for Quectel Wireless Solutions. So Quectel is a global IoT solutions company. So we provide modules from cellular modules, GNSS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, as well as antennas, connectivity, and all parts of a IoT connected solution. So we're a global company, and as our panelists here have mentioned, that we have the booth as well in the IoT area, so I invite you all to come visit, and we'll get more into it, but the motto and the mission of Quectel is to build a smarter world. So this is also a topic very near and dear to my heart, so looking forward to speaking more about it.
Thanks, Natasha. Ivo, I run a company called Once. And Once is actually not so small anymore. We connect 15 million devices already. We're active in 150 countries. And we're operating out of about 50 countries. And what we do is we provide global connected products. But we provide really connectivity as a component. So at Once we say, actually, we're changing the IoT industry so that our customers can change the world. We're actually here because of you. I mean, we deeply care about this whole topic of saving the planet. I actually am convinced that digitizing things will help better results, better yield, but also less waste and so on. So it's absolutely possible to help save the planet using IoT. And we try to contribute with that. And why do we do that? We believe that connectivity should be available as easy as a component. Our customers build connectivity into the products so that they can function 10 years long, and building them into it only once, hence the name. Connectivity into your product only once, and it will function for 10 years. What's mind-blowing? Redesigning the entire supply chain, you only have to pay $10 for it. And why is that relevant? It's because we believe we enable use cases that normally would not operate at scale anywhere in the world, and we need to do it everywhere in the world, otherwise we can't save the planet.
Well, saving the planet, that's a pretty tall order. There's a lot of different things we can do. I think when we were looking at this topic, we said, wow, what are some of the things that we can do? And in reality, we all play a part, all of us in this room. It takes a planet to save a planet. Right? And coming as at least for myself, as from a technology background, there are certain things that technology can do. It can accelerate, it can facilitate, but we know that technology by itself isn't enough, right? And a lot of us will have to work together to really save the planet in our own different ways. So I'm going to start off with one question, right, which is, before we start talking about how we save the planet, what does it mean to save the planet? What's it mean to you? How's it, how has, some of the things that you've seen, how has that affected you personally? So for me, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and there's a part of the San Francisco Bay Area that's semi-rural, so we got a lot of trees and everything. But with the last 5-6 years, we've been impacted by the drought and by wildfires. Right? So I think a few years ago, I remembered it was during October. There were a lot of big winds going and wildfires. The humidity was down to 15%. And the winds were blowing. There was a fire 5 miles away, and I was on my roof, sweeping the leaves off my roof, right? Because we were afraid that the wind would blow the fire into our roof. So that was pretty scary. And we've been impacted by droughts. We've been impacted by the huge, unusual storm this past weekend. There was a mudslide on the hill on our property. So we were impacted by that. We had the wildfire, the air quality problems, the really bad smoke that you never really heard about before. All of a sudden, it got into the San Francisco Bay Area, and we were impacted. The air quality was so bad, you couldn't even go outside. Right? So, I'm starting to see some of those things that we haven't seen before. Right? So it seems to get worse and worse every year. Mobeen, I'll start with you. What does saving the planet mean to you and personally?
Yeah, great question. So I was thinking about this before coming here, and I looked at the United Nations 17-point sustainability goals and all the things that a lot of the governments and companies are sort of congregating around those 17 United Nations goals. And 3 of those appeal to me from the IoT perspective. I mean, there's others like inequality, reducing poverty, reducing inequality. But the 3 that made a lot of sense to me from an IoT perspective, one was infrastructure and infrastructure. The second was food safety. And then the third one was all about climate monitoring. And when I think about this, I look at everybody has a different point of view where they are and what they do. Just quick short thing, my son came home for Christmas break from UT Austin, where he goes to college, and he also, as a side, works for a magazine as a creative director. And he said, my goal is that next year, only half of the clothes that I buy are going to be new clothes. I'm going to buy thrift and used and whatever, and because that's how I'm going to save the planet. And I was like, this is interesting. We talked a little bit about this panel I was going to be on. But I think from our perspective, from an IoT perspective, it goes to the old adage of you can only manage and you can only change what you can measure. And so what we at IoT can do is allow that measurement to take place in all the places that you want the change to occur. And to me, that's what it means to save the planet, is measure, 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 and then figure out strategies to change.
Oh, good. So for me, it was really interesting, this topic for the panel, because as I mentioned, it's a topic near and dear to my heart. So actually, I was working at an MVNO, which is a mobile virtual network operator in IoT, living in Spain, and I did that for a couple of years, and I moved back to the States, and I thought, you know what, I think I'm going to just get out of technology. I originally always wanted to make the world a better place. So I said, I'm going to apply to a bunch of nonprofit organizations, hospitals in which I could use my language skills to help people. And then I got approached by a company called Wireless that was acquired by Core, another MVNO where I worked for several years before coming to Quectel. And I decided to take the role as opposed to going to work for a nonprofit, as tempting as it was. And the more I thought about it, when we look at IoT and when we look at the different use cases and applications that we can do, working for a specific nonprofit, I was looking at one aspect of how we could save the planet or how I could make the world a better place. Whereas here, in my role now at Quectel and in any of the roles that I've had within IoT over the past 10 years, I can be talking in one moment to a customer that's making something that helps with the energy crisis, another company that's working on electric vehicles, climate change, safety and security. So there's so many various use cases and applications that IoT covers that actually makes the world a better place. And then at Quectel, as I mentioned earlier, our motto or our mission as a company is build a smarter world. So hopefully I'll be giving many of you my business cards, and you'll see even on our business card, it's build a smarter world at our booth. And that's really, the core of our company and really a core of IoT. So for me, it incorporates all of these areas that we can save the planet, from a physical way, and climate and the planet physically, as well as opening up communication among people, facilitating that. So yeah, that's what it means to me.
That's a lot. I'm going to try and trim it down for myself. That's the only way I can sometimes handle complexity. Just to think, what is the one thing that I'm going to be focusing on? And it always ends up being your passion. And my passion for me in this case is corporate waste. I've been working the larger part of my career for companies, billions of valuation, massive corporations. And then during COVID, I actually made a decision for myself, go away from the billion companies. I changed to the investor side, and then we led the Series B that ultimately acquired a stake in Once. And ever since, I've been mind-blown. It's so incredible what you can achieve when you build a company nowadays from the ground up, 100% digital. We're now 300 people. We went live in 19 countries 2 weeks ago in Asia. And I realized we went live in 19 countries. We didn't do a single flight over there. And if you then go back and you see what type of waste big corporations actually have and how embeddedly inefficient some of the supply chains are, I'm like, that's my area. I really want to build a company that is so super efficient in its own utilization of funds and build big stuff with very small means, that becomes the norm. So corporate waste is what I try to address. But I need to edit now because I love what the son of Mobeen said, because I got 5 kids. Now, if those 5 kids all have the amount of clothes that they buy, that's a lot of savings, not just for the planet, also for me.
That's right.
Well, that's great. Great answer. Mobeen, I'm going to have your son talk to my daughter also.
Great.
Mobeen, you said something that was interesting, right? Yeah, you said with IoT, you can measure something, right? If you measure something, you kind of know where you stand. And if you know where you stand, you could do something about it, right? So I think IoT with sensors, with some of the technologies that you're able to connect those sensors out in the field, for example, you know what's happening, right? So I was at one of the booths, and I saw a company that was doing precision agriculture, and they had sensors, and they go through a field. They see the weeds, and they spray just the right amount of herbicide on the plant, right? So they're not spraying the whole field. So in that way, they're targeting it, right? So, what are some of the ways that IoT can play? Right? What roles? Right?
Sure.
And what are some of the things that you've seen or heard from your customers doing real things in this area?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I brought some props to show you for that. Our customers, we provide the infrastructure and some components of the IoT measurement solution. Actually, our solution incorporates some of the stuff from Once and Quectel, and it's sort of a semi-integrated piece that developers, engineers use to measure whatever they're trying to measure in corporate or in environmental monitoring. So a lot of our focus has been working with developers and engineers who build environmental monitoring solutions. Actually, the company's history itself started where our founder, Ray Ozzie, built 12 years ago, it was 10 years ago actually, a little over 10 years, Fukushima disaster-based radiation monitoring. And that turned into a product, so I can show you. You talked about California wildfires. So this is one of our customers that built this. It's an AirNote product. It does a simple thing. It's solar powered, and they measure air quality. And so you can look at this and figure out whether you want to go out or not, or send your kid out or not. But more importantly, every AirNote that gets deployed works for this is a non-for-profit customer. They aggregate data, and that's where the real beauty comes in, is that they aggregate data from all of us, putting this outside our homes and offices, and then they share it with the citizens. So they share it with municipalities, and so if you had wildfires a few miles from you, or hopefully not, but you could, in real time, look at everybody who has deployed an air quality monitoring solution and start to look at it. Another application is this big thingy. It's a radiation monitor. Now, hopefully we never have to get warned about this, but nuclear power plants, which in the Western world there are many of them, they have requirements to share data, and they have trucks that drive around measuring nuclear whatever leakage and so on, and it has a Geiger counter in it. So they built this solution, and this goes onto rooftops and on poles outside of up to a few miles outside of nuclear power plants installations, to just look at what it is and report it in real time to the government agencies and so on. The thing that I really wanted to bring and I couldn't is we have a customer who is putting buoys. They're about this big on ocean, and they measure waves. I have another customer in Scotland that is putting sensors in streams for flooding. So these are all great solutions. I think what is missing is that there are point solutions being put in place. And, if you have rain, you're going to get mudslides. You have mudslides, it has some chain reactions. A lot of these companies are not sharing data amongst each other. And so one of the things that I think needs to happen is a lot of data exchange and collaboration for us to really start to put things together so that we can put solutions that save the planet.
Yeah, one of the things that I believe is a real important thing that we need to realize as suppliers to all of you. Eventually, you are our customers, and we just make it happen, as we say. We're not the ones changing the world, you are. And what I really think IoT is, in that way, could actually be, and should actually be, a great equalizer. Because I know some of the products that Mobeen has built, and a lot of our customers have products from Natasha in there. But what I like about it is, I'll give you an example, a really small company, tiny company in Romania, that rebuilt a TCU for lighting that actually reduced the cost of turning a not-so-smart light bulb in a city lighting into a very small and very smart light bulb without having to climb the pole twice. Of course, they put us in so only once, but the point there being is they completely changed the way smart lighting could be deployed. It's a small company in Romania, and they recently won the tender to deploy 75,000 lights in Washington, D.C. Nobody saw them coming. And of course, it's great for Washington, D.C., but isn't it beautiful for a small company in Romania being able to win a tender like that? And if we do our jobs right, we're going to give much more power to these little, very innovative companies to strike large and have big impact.
Yeah, that's what we've seen and has been really interesting as well about IoT is that it comes from an idea, right? A lot of it is how they have an idea of how they want to save the planet, and then as they look into ways in which they can do that, they end up at IoT because it integrates all of these different technologies that allow them to get there, to that point. So, for example, whether it comes from things like transporting vaccines during the pandemic. So we had customers that were doing that. That's, obvious use case about how that helps saves the planet. But when it comes to, smart lighting or remote patient monitoring or things like that, different unique use cases in which people say, okay, well, there's these MPERS devices that are the personal emergency response that may be used for the elderly, but also for children, right? So now we have customers and people in the ecosystem that are making watches that are specific for children so they can make sure that the parents know where they are, that they can be, tracked, but also give them more opportunities to listen to music or do other cool things like that. But they have just an idea, and then the more you dig into it, it's the IoT element of it that allows, these opportunities and these companies to exist.
Yeah, I think a lot of the key, right, is there's not any one thing that we do to save the planet. It's a lot of these little things, one at a time, right? And that's kind of the message here. I'll give an example. I know Mobeen, you showed the air quality monitor. So in a lot of the commercial construction projects we've seen, this is from our smart city projects, one of the things that they do is the construction sites, they kick up a lot of dust. Right? Yeah. And so if you're around the surrounding area, the air quality is actually pretty poor. And so all the commercial builders would have to submit a mitigation plan. Right? But they don't really measure it. But you could take an air quality monitor, even just mount it on the mobile, and just measure it, and as long as they know, they could water down, or they could stop some of the trucks. Like those are just little things like that. Those are just use cases that no one's doing. In fact, you should be doing it. But that's an example. Just little ways that we could play our part. These technology has a lot of potential opportunities to make a difference, but what are some of the technologies that's underlying this? You've showed the sensors, but what are the things that you don't see that make powering this?
Yeah, if we go back, 10, 15 years a little bit, if you were building an e-commerce site, for example, to sell whatever goods you had, you had to do a lot of things. You had to buy the servers and get a data center space and then get the connectivity into the data center and then all the stuff that you had to do before you could sell your first product online. The bar was very high. IoT is still going through that evolution. There's still so many complex steps that a developer and engineer has to do before they can actually start to collect the first reading from an air quality sensor. So I think as an industry, all of us are trying to make things easier, complex, more integrated, so that less complex, so that all of these things can work together, almost like a plug and play, just like what the cloud providers and hyperscalers have done in the e-commerce industry or the applications industry. So I think as a big challenge for us from an IoT industry is to make sure that kind of ease of building and development takes place. And to Ivo's point, then if you build that and you give them that, then the best ideas just start to pop up. And they don't have to be selling millions to make money. They can sell 10,000 and have a great business, and the world can benefit.
Yeah.
Mobeen and I actually have a fascination for something that I'm not sure if everybody realizes is a really built-in inefficiency in the IoT industry. You have basically two sets of data that matter. There's the set of data that sits on a sensor, but the sensor is hardware. So that data that sits on a sensor basically talks hardware-related protocols. I won't go into any details, but believe me, that's specific to hardware. And there's a second set of data that is incredibly important. It is all that data that comes from all these sensors, and it now sits in the cloud. And that's being produced in the cloud, it's being interpreted in the cloud. You put AI on it, ML, because you want to turn all that data into some actionable intelligence. And the funny thing about the IoT industry is the data set on the sensor, hardware related, the data sets in the cloud that are cloud-based protocols, they don't talk to each other really well. Ask any developer about this. This is one of their biggest frustrations. So what can we now do as supply chain to these developers to make these protocols talk easier to each other? So we're having discussions with Quectel. Can we make these protocols more efficient and so on? So there's no magic solution out there, but there's too much profit pools, to be frank, initially in the IoT industry. Operators one, software the other, and that completely defragmentizes the entire supply chain. You got to break that. It takes few small companies to break that.
Yeah. And if anybody wants to geek out on those, I'm happy to do that later.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting, speaking of the protocols, right? So we have lightweight M2M, so now we can do, over-the-air updates. So for example, we have customers, for example, a customer in Brazil that's doing a smart agriculture application. And when you put these devices out there, a lot of these times in IoT, they're gonna live out there for, 5, 10, 15, up to 20 years. And we're getting more and more requirements from companies in IoT that when we talk about, smart meters, smart grids, any home, smart home appliances, that they want those to remain in the field for 20 years, but they can't have, what we call a truck roll, or people go out and make actual physical updates. So the ability to be able to update those things over the air is really critically important. So we continue to see new protocols coming out. To Ivo's point is and to Mobeen's point, making sure that all of these different protocols are aligned and connected and not so fragmented in the market. But back to a comment that was made earlier, another thing that's really exciting is that we're now seeing these technologies that enable IoT not only becoming less complex, but also cheaper and cheaper. So when we look at the different technologies, like we used to have an LTE, Cat 1, Cat 4 at a certain price point, but now we've had Cat M, NB-IoT, now Cat 1 BIS is a new technology that's coming. We have 5G that was, very, high price when it comes to modules, which is coming down, and now we have 5G RedCap, reduced capability. So that's going to be opening up more opportunities for IoT solutions to be able to deploy 5G at reasonable price points in the future. So that's really exciting as well, giving people more opportunities at lower cost to bring their visions to life to save the planet.
So I think you guys brought up I heard some pretty interesting points here, right? One was that, I guess, IoT is not one technology, but a lot of different technologies have to work together. Right? Some of them are more mature than others. Some will require a lot more work to put together. There's a lot of different suppliers out there that have different things with different protocols. In a lot of ways, IoT is still an emerging set of technologies. Right? As part of our research, funded through the National Institute of Standards and Technology, we look at those technology infrastructure gaps and where the federal government should be investing through its national labs, through industry research grants, through university grants, to kind of close those gaps, because it has a huge potential to enable a lot of things that we talked about, saving the planet. Saving the planet shouldn't be that hard to do, right? It should be something very easy. I have an idea, let's go put it together, let's go do it. What are some of the areas, speaking from your perspective, since it's a kind of a newish technology, what are some of the areas that still need to be developed a little further, right, so that it could be adopted at scale by people around the planet?
Any product that we deliver today in the market with existing technologies doesn't automatically live for about 10 years. And Natasha just said something super relevant. One of the things that all of our customers ask for is, if I deploy this, an IoT device, for it to be economically viable, should be produced, connected for about $5, about $1 a year for connectivity anywhere in the world. If you want to do that, and then it needs to be live for 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, you know what the biggest problem of the entire IoT industry is? You said the word, truck roll. One truck roll too many, and your business case is bust. So and that's not a technology thing, but what we need to start to do is start to get used to building a technology that can be deployed into a hard-to-reach place that you never have to visit twice and still keep it current. And that's a super important design thinking factor. And that is what I really ask everyone to do. When you start building your products, developing your hardware, think about lifetime. Not just 2 or 3 years, lifetime of a product.
I think I'll say a couple of encouraging words, which is we have a lot of problems to solve to get to what Ivo was saying in terms of reducing cost and complexity. I think we're all trying to do that. But in general, the good news is the cost of the silicon is still continuing to drop significantly. And it gets translated every 12, 18 months down to the consumers and to the developers. The cost of bandwidth declines anywhere from 10% to about 22% a year. New technologies that Natasha was talking about come in to reduce those costs. So the encouraging part is that every year the total cost of a solution is declining in at least 20+% every year. What that does, it enables more and more things that previously you thought could never be connected, because it's just, if I have a car and it costs $20,000 to $100,000, can I connect it with a SIM? That was 10 years ago. You know, you and I both worked in that area for many years. But now every little thing can be connected, and it's the curve starts to fall and fall and fall, and that's encouraging. And that's where, when you hear about hundreds of millions and billions of units getting connected, that's what's going to happen. And the data produced from those things is going to completely change every process, especially when it comes to saving the planet and all kinds of sustainability goals.
Yeah, and, the operative word that you said, Mobeen, there is can be connected, and I think that's what we see when, all the buzzwords of, when we see it, think smart home, smart building, smart city, is you have all of these really exciting use cases and applications that do different things, but then the idea of having, how do they all connect together, right? So it's great that you have a water leak detector, that you have a security camera in the home, that you have the smart doorbell, but how are these things able to all talk together is also one of the big things I think that a lot of these things are addressing as well, that we're working towards.
I don't even know, but we're sitting in an audience full of superheroes, and they're here to save the planet with IoT. What best practices or lessons learned that we could share with them from your experiences?
Yeah, the one thing that we encourage as a company, and I've done this, is that we are extremely developer-centric company. So we want people to try. Sometimes people get discouraged just by the complexity, and I need to buy things from 12 different places, and it's going to be expensive. I would just say, buy a kit from any one of us or anyone and go and build something. And what you will learn from that is you will learn. You may go in knowing one thing or trying to solve one problem, and I guarantee you will address at least 3 to 5 things that you can do. So a lot of the individual developers that we work with, some of them are just hobbyists. They're building a bird feeder or a beehive monitoring thing for their backyard or something like that. So I would encourage anybody who wants to get their hand dirty, get a kit, a connector kit, and just start building connected devices.
Yeah, I think what I would say is a couple of things is it's critically important to have a strong technology partner. So when you think about vendors and suppliers, but also a partner, because with IoT applications, it's not a product that takes a month to develop. And I used to be the director of strategic partnerships, and when I went over to Quectel, I started in sales. But even though it's sales, it is partnerships, because these relationships last for years, because development cycles can take anywhere, from 6 to 18 plus months that you're going through this development cycle. And within that time, a new technology could come out. So you also always need to be thinking about what's the next gen, but what's the next gen? And do I have, when I'm laying out a board or building my hardware, am I designing it so that when the next technology comes along, I can easily drop in a new module? Or, I built this device, but it was an afterthought about the antenna. How am I going to integrate that into the device? What do I do now? So always thinking about every part of the device and every part of the technology at the beginning, and working with a partner that understands all of those different elements, so you don't get stuck in a position where you should have realized that a little bit earlier.
So I'm not going to disagree with you, but I'm going to take a total different angle when I give advice. I'm being asked this every now and then. I go back to my 2 years ago when I was judging a lot of companies from the investment angle. And when we were talking to all these companies, and many of them were taken off guard by the first moment in the meeting where I always said, listen, your technology, it's going to work. Just assume it's going to work. You don't need to talk to me about your technology. Tell me how you're going to distribute it. Tell me how you are going to introduce this to the world in 50 countries in less than 3 months. How are you going to service it? So the whole point is, when you have a great idea, it's not about technology. It's about being able to distribute that worldwide at an incredibly low cost, super efficient, so that people can actually afford your impact, your disruption. I mean, in that case, I do take a page out of the Once playbook. Connectivity, before we entered the market, the average market price, if you ask operators, for a connected device anywhere in the world was about $2 to $3 a month. We turned that into $1 a year, working for 10 years, and I'd say publicly, and making a very solid margin. You can only do that, not because of tech, because we completely changed how we distribute, how we procure, and how our customers consume a product as a component. So it's not about tech, it's about distribution.
Yeah, one thing that you talked about distribution that triggered a question. One of the key factors is getting these people to be getting their hands dirty. And so one of the things that I think any of you who are influencers in your education or coming from colleges and stuff is I think we need to introduce people, type of courses, seminars, even at the age of 12 or higher, to get their hands dirty with technology. There's so much discouragement in all of the education systems right now. My kids, I have a high schooler also, and they have their computer classes and stuff like that, but the labs that really get you to go build these things, it's not that hard, and so we should all encourage our kids and through any education systems to get people to get their hands dirty. And 10 years from now, that's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, and you mentioned maybe Mobeen, getting a dev kit from any of our companies. People can build really their own IoT application pretty easily, and it's just to your point, Ivo, just how you scale it, how you actually deploy it to the world is really where that comes in. But anybody can really build an IoT application, which is exciting.
And by that, we also need to show constraint, because on the one hand, we're sitting here trying to motivate anybody to build an enormous amount of tech and to distribute it at the grandest possible way, which of course is good, but we're sitting here to save the planet, right? And the one thing, coming all back to the beginning, the one thing that sometimes frustrates me a little is how incredibly inefficient actually the supply chain of IoT is. Isn't it ironic that we're shipping out plastic SIMs, billions of that on a daily basis, not just me, but in the whole industry? I mean, listen, that a plastic SIM, that's a boarding pass, it's a paper boarding pass as an equivalent. We're putting all these billions of devices, each of them has a battery. That's precious metals we're putting in the ground. So, and I love it, there's companies out there who want to print it nowadays in a sustainable way. So, yes, all of them need to save the planet, use our tech, preferably, of course, but we should also have a long look at ourselves and take the waste out of our own industry, because there's too much of it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, so I think what I'm hearing is, the technology's out there that just get started, just get going. There's opportunities to partner with some of the technology providers, and they'll provide you with some of the equipment, or and they're willing to work with you, right? And then once you get something going, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Just get it going, then get it out there as fast as you can. Tell everybody and distribute it, or let everyone know, and then build and improve on it. So that's what I kind of hear, right? And there's a lot of different ways that we can go and save the planet, right? So each one of us, in some ways, it's never been easier to go do it. I think there are a lot of people that are very interested in helping out. There are tools that are available. There may be not always the easiest sometimes, but there's an opportunity. There's the partnerships that you can form, and then there's ways to just get it out there and scale so we can start making a difference right away. I think we've got about 30 seconds left. We had hoped to open up the session to questions, but I think everyone's going to be here to take any questions afterwards. So we look forward to answering any questions you may have and continuing the discussion. I think you guys have booths downstairs in the.
I think North Hall, like 8,000 to 10,000 booths. That's all IoT infrastructure. You should go talk to a bunch of companies if you're interested in that. We are there. All three of us are there.
You find one of us, you find all of us.
Yeah. That's right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.